Hi, everyone. Today we are having Morgan, a CEO at Hopscotch. Hi, Morgan. Thank you so much for coming.
Yeah, great to be here. Yeah, co-founder and CEO at Hopscotch. We're building a marketplace centered around trust and verification. People kind of call us the on-chain eBay, or kind of like a verified Facebook marketplace, because we enable buyers and sellers to choose the perfect verifier for any deal. Yeah, thanks for having me on here.
Nice. Yeah, and you have a very interesting background, right? You started as a hacker, and now you're leading a Web3 company. So what was the biggest mindset shift in that transition?
Yeah, I have, a felony for computer fraud. I do have that. And I'd say the biggest shift was probably learning that trust isn't built through control. It's built through transparency. Right. And as a hacker, trust came from reputation and secrecy, where you proved yourself by what you could uncover, what you could protect, kind of like how you operated in the shadows. Right. But in Web3, trust is earned in the open. Right. Your project becomes stronger the more you share your code, your vision, like even your failures. Right. And at first, I'd say that felt like a weakness, like giving away too much of the secret sauce. Right. But you realize that in a decentralized world, trust isn't about really what you keep hidden. It's about what you're willing to put out in the open and really kind of let the community shape alongside you. So that was kind of like the biggest takeaway for sure.
Yeah, very interesting. Also, you've worked in hybrid electric engineering, right? And in trading. How these fields influence your thinking in Web3?
Yeah, like hybrid electric engineering and high frequency trading, they taught me about trust in very different ways. In engineering, kind of like trust meant precision, right? In terms of like if a single component failed, the entire system could collapse, right? It was kind of like, it was binary. It either worked flawlessly or it didn't. Whereas in trading, that was much more about managing the uncertainty. Markets move on confidence, and trust is something you've got to price in. Even more so, like the illusion of trust crafted through hype or manipulation could just be as powerful as real trust, at least for a short period of time. And Web3 is interesting. It sits at this kind of like intersection of both. It requires the engineering trust of, say, secure smart contracts, and the market trust of a community. So like the technology needs to work really well, but like belief in the project is what really like drives the adoption of the project. And so building a successful Web3 company, it means navigating both those worlds really well, like ensuring the technical reliability while also conveying this like really powerful and compelling story for sure.
Yeah, totally nice. And what do you think? What's the biggest misconception about hackers that you've heard?
The biggest misconception is kind of a fun question. People think that black hat hacking pays a lot of money, but like the reality is it's risky and unstable. Like it's the worst of both worlds. You think of ethical hackers like bug bounty hunters and even just like security professionals in general. You can make some serious money without having to look over your shoulder, right? And so like some bounties at this point like hit six figures, and the work leads to a real career with big opportunities. So instead of like running from the law, you can get paid, you can be recognized and be respected. So like I'd say that's definitely the biggest misconception from that people think about me is like, hey, I've made a bunch of money because I was a black hat hacker. It's kind of quite the opposite. I lived with kind of like this insane level of anxiety. Not sustainable.
Yeah, that's funny. And what do you think? How do you use this hacking mindset in solving business problems?
Yeah, how do I use the hacking mindset to solve business problems? Like as a hacker, I was always about creative problem solving. Understanding the rules and finding ways to work with them, or around them in certain cases. And when I looked at e-commerce, I found these just like massive trust issues. Buyers and sellers don't trust each other, and marketplaces which were supposed to fix this, it feels like they've become part of the problem, right? They're selling your data, their fees are way too high. They often favor one side or the other, like always siding with buyers or always siding with sellers, depending on the platform you're on. So I thought like, why not flip the system here? Instead of relying on a marketplace to control the trust, why not create a way for buyers and sellers to bring in someone that they already trust, right? It's about putting trust back where it belongs, which in this case is in the hands of the people who matter most, which are your customers, your users, and your community, moving forward.
So this is the original inspiration behind the idea of Hopscotch.
Yeah, a bit. The inspiration from Hopscotch comes from like a deep personal understanding about trust, right? And in this case, it's like how it's lost, how it's rebuilt, and how fragile like it truly is. And I've seen it from all sides, like literally from committing computer fraud, right? During my time as a hacker, to being defrauded, millions of dollars while building hybrid electric trucks. And I've experienced kind of like the full spectrum. And I've learned how trust can be built through also kind of like my work with high frequency trading and settlement systems, like where trust wasn't just a concept, it was literally the foundation of every trade and transfer. And so like this inspiration, it's certainly not just for me. Like think about your own experiences with trust. Like how many times have you faced the challenge of deciding whether to trust a new website, right? Or, whether an app you just downloaded is safe to use, or even like a person you've met online, right? How many times has your trust like been broken? And I feel like we've all been there. And these stories are what kind of like really drove me to create a solution that allows us to build trust on our own terms, right? And certainly to work to eliminate fraud, but that's kind of like where the inspiration came from. Is like, hey, this like full spectrum of trust. You had to experience it to kind of like learn how to fix it.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Could you please walk us through the platform, how it works, and how does the verifier system ensures security?
Yeah, so think of Hopscotch like, on-chain eBay, with a twist, right? Hopscotch lets you choose the right verifier for any deal. And so I'll give you an example. Like if you're buying a used car, you could have your local car mechanic be a verifier. So if the seller lies about the mileage, or maybe the engine's actually blown, you can get your money back, right? Or on the opposite side of things, maybe you're selling something. Maybe you're selling an expensive watch. You could have a verified watchmaker confirm the authenticity of the watch, which prevents the buyer from, swapping it out after they've received it and claiming it's a fake. And on the third part of it, in terms of like we just covered buyer, we just covered the seller. On the third part of it as a verifier, you could literally just be a trustworthy person or like an expert in your field, and you could get paid to verify deals for others. And an important component of Hopscotch was that anyone could be a verifier, right? Anyone can begin to build trust, online in this capacity. And this is kind of like how we inject a verifier into every deal. And our job is really making sure that there's a verifier that you can both trust that's available on the platform for whatever you're trying to do.
Thanks. And why did you choose Web3 for Hopscotch? Couldn't this work in the traditional Web2 as well?
Yeah, it's a really good question. Like, in a Web2 setup, like the marketplace or platform usually helps escrow the money, right? And they act as this kind of like intermediary that can introduce a lot of risks and requirements. And these platforms can freeze accounts. They can certainly charge high fees. They can even sell your data to the highest bidder, right? It can get bad. And the buyer and seller are basically forced to trust the platform, right? Which is the exact kind of trust that Hopscotch kind of works to eliminate. And so I'd say Web3, it's not the right environment. It's the only environment for Hopscotch, because it's the only environment that offers the critical feature of self-custodial payments, right? We can help structure, a verified deal between a buyer, seller, and verifier in which we never touch the money. And that is kind of the most critical piece of how our platform works, for sure.
Okay, got you. Thanks. And what's the biggest barrier stopping decentralized trust from becoming mainstream?
If you ask me next week, it might be a different answer, but I gotta be honest with you. This space just moves so fast. But right now, I'd say there's a good quote that kind of like, summarizes this up, which is, show me the incentives and I will show you the outcome. It's a famous quote by Charlie Munger, died about 2 years ago. But kind of the reasoning is that incentives shape almost everything. And this is especially true with marketplaces and also like most messaging apps as well. Like some are great at business and some are great at privacy. And kind of like the more business you can do on these apps and marketplaces, the less privacy you have. And likewise, the more privacy you want, the less business you can do. So they kind of like, they work against each other, right? And none of them seem to get the balance right. And this is kind of really the problem. We say this thing internally, which is like privacy isn't profitable, right? And we need apps that can do both, that can really align these incentives much more properly, right? And so I see that as kind of like the next generation of applications here that are able to gain product market fit in this market.
Okay, thanks. On the platform, you allow users to choose between human verifiers and AI. Would you personally trust an AI to resolve like big money issues?
Like on a general basis, personally, I probably wouldn't rely on an AI loan to resolve like $1 million dispute. And that's not a problem I have yet. It's one I want to have in the future. But like, while AI excels at, say, analyzing data, identifying patterns, it does really well. It makes okay predictions. It still lacks the kind of like nuance and judgment that human experience brings. And so when you have these high stakes disputes, which kind of like they often involve like this level of emotional intelligence and contextual understanding that AI just can't replicate yet. Now, there is kind of a but coming. Like, I do see AI as a really powerful tool to support human verifiers, right? They can efficiently process like the terms of a deal that could be like super complex. They could assess both sides of a conversation, in a fairly good way. They could also present that information in a generally unbiased manner. There are some edge cases there, but ultimately, kind of like the most effective solution here is probably a hybrid, right? AI handling the heavy lifting with human verifiers making kind of like the final informed decision. But we'll see, right? Like, it feels like we're in the early innings of AI here, certainly in AI arbitration. We're pre-singularity. Depending on what you read, that's 6 months away to 6 years away. I'm certainly not the expert there, but it really depends on like the product and deal that's being disputed. There are definitely cases where I would prefer an AI or kind of like, say, machine learning based system to make that determination, especially like if it's, say, 100 times cheaper than hiring a professional or an expert or a group of professionals and group of experts. And so, we originally designed this AI verifier kind of use case for lower cost transactions, but we'll see where this goes. Like, what about you? Would you trust an AI to resolve $1 million dispute?
No, not now. Yeah, I totally agree with you. It has to be a hybrid, like AI helps humans. Okay, thanks. And you're launching on Base. Why? Why did you choose Base?
Why did we choose Base? Well, that could have like two very different answers, I feel like. The first one is that Base is highly integrated with Coinbase. So you have this like really easy and low cost on-ramp and off-ramp. Like, it doesn't cost 5% to get in and out. It costs 0% to get in and out, or close to it. And that's a huge advantage for commerce, right? The more you can kind of reduce that take rate. But the other angle here is that, to a degree, the chain doesn't matter, to us, in fact. Like, if we're doing our job well, you don't realize you're using a blockchain, right? Kind of that's really the goal. It feels like eBay. It feels like Facebook Marketplace. So, like, yes, it matters. We didn't just throw a dart at the wall and choose Base. But also kind of like, no, it doesn't matter too much. Like, our goal is for you to not realize that it's even in the background here.
Okay, thanks. And you're raising a round now. You're raising 800K before a token launch. Why now is the right moment for this raise?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to pitch Hopscotch too much, and I definitely don't want to try to like sell you on it. That's not why I'm here. Like, I'll give you an example. I just came back from ETH Denver, and the number one reason I went was to figure out if like meme mania was over. Is the market ready to value utility again? And the answer was overwhelmingly yes. Like, we need 100 times more consumer apps than we have now, right? In crypto, and we are way behind, basically, considering the opportunity. So I'll kind of present an example. Like, if eBay, as a business, if that was a token, it would be ranked 9th on CoinMarketCap, and that's just one marketplace, right? And so yes, I'd say yes. There is no better time to launch this than right now, and it's full steam ahead as soon as we possibly can. We're up till 2, 3, 4 a.m. every single night trying to get this out.
Okay, thanks. And also, there are many projects that use tokens as a fundraising tool, but this token then doesn't have real utility. How do you ensure that Hopscotch token will have this value?
So number one is just kind of like, you've got to be able to build an amazing product. And for us, that means making buying, selling, and verifying really easy. On the token side, I'd say, that shouldn't be our focus and isn't our focus just quite yet. Yes, we're kind of like, we're raising money, and that is something that we want to look for in the future. We definitely want to take advantage of, the incentives that we can provide for users through kind of a token-based model. But at the same time, like, we are a product first company here. And so, before even thinking about a token, we need to make sure that we've built something our customers love, right? The token and the token model itself has evolved quite a bit. We look at examples like Hyperliquid. They spent 9 months, laser focused on building and distributing an incredible product before launching a token, right? And when they did it, it created massive wealth for the users, right? And that's kind of like the power of community. When your users become your biggest advocates, it's almost like cult-like, in a good way. And a community like that is just like absolutely unstoppable. And so I think everyone that's looking at launching a token needs to study that playbook very, very closely.
Totally, yeah. And how are you planning to attract these real users that will be there for a product and not just to flip tokens?
So yeah, you have to make sure that you're delivering real value, right? In terms of like you're solving a real problem. And we weren't always doing that as a company ourselves in terms of like actually solving real problems that customers were having. We really had to get out in the world and communicate with our customers as to, hey, sellers have massive issues with marketplaces in terms of like they almost always side with the buyers. Buyers, they are charged indirectly high fees on these platforms. eBay charges 15%, right? And that's a 50% higher cost for the items that they're purchasing. And the marketplaces, they sometimes, like when there's a dispute, they sometimes hold the money for 30, 60 days. They lock that up. And I don't know if you've gone through like a PayPal dispute or an eBay dispute, but it's a pretty awful process. And like when I start a dispute, it feels like I've lost that money already, right? And so, our number one goal is to prevent fraud. And as we deliver on that, there's extreme value there. Fraud is a really big problem in the world. And so, that's what we focus on, day in and day out.
Okay, thanks. And how do you see, what's your long-term vision for the token, for the Hopscotch token?
Yeah, that's an easy, I don't know the answer to that yet. It's something we'll learn more about after our launch, kind of like what pieces of our platform need to be incentivized here. There are aspects that we don't want to be able to, I think one important aspect is like, you don't want to be able to buy your reputation onto a platform. Past that, I probably don't have a good answer for you here.
Okay. Let's talk about after the token launch. What's the biggest risk Web3 startups underestimate regarding the security?
Oh, the biggest risk is by far the human component. You have to human-proof your software, right? Like in the cybersecurity world, we have a phrase where there's only two types of companies: ones that know they've been hacked and ones that don't, right? And so you literally have to be changing your passwords on a monthly basis, like before you get compromised, ideally, right? You have to take the time to map out your security and understand where the gaps are, right? You have to put in the effort and you have to put in the time, and it is 100% worth it. That would, I'd say, the biggest risk, just that human component. Human-proof your software as much as you can.
Yeah, thanks. Decentralized dispute resolution introduces new attack vectors. How do you mitigate risks of manipulation or fraud?
Yeah, manipulation and fraud is certainly a big deal as you introduce new systems, right? Because there are new holes, there are new things you're bringing into the fold that can be attacked in different ways. But I think we see it a little bit differently in the sense that Facebook Marketplace helps facilitate something like $100 billion a year in commerce, right? And at Hopscotch, we call this risky commerce. And manipulation and fraud is already there, right? Sometimes, like, I think I've read stats of over 40% of marketplace listings are fake and fraudulent, like absolutely ridiculous. And so we see this transition of converting risky commerce into verified commerce. And so we're the solution. We're not the problem. We're not introducing major risks. We're solving them. We're kind of like closing those gaps. And so I think that's how we are approaching the problem. It's like, hey, there's a lot of risky commerce going on, risky commerce that we can convert into verified commerce.
Also, Web3 security is constantly evolving. Are we getting safer, or is it still a Wild West?
That's kind of a tough one. Like, it's definitely still an offensive game. I feel like a good offense still beats a good defense. And that's like super bad for business. there's no doubt about it. Where everyone out here is like, they're hacking each other. Take the $1.5 billion Bybit hack as like our most recent warning here. It forces you to focus on tools that kind of like help you adapt faster to more dynamic threats versus like building, big locked doors to prevent the known threats. And so, I think the need here is to you have to think like a hacker a bit to prepare your systems. Your platforms have to be up to date, and your number one goal has to always be making sure that your users are in kind of the best opportunity or the best situation to be able to stay safe. So, you have to put your users first in this situation.
Okay, thanks. Decentralized dispute resolution has been attempted before. Why hasn't it taken off yet? And why will Hopscotch succeed where others have struggled?
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of answers to this one. It's a good question in terms of like, hey, kind of like what makes us different? How are we going to succeed versus everyone else has failed in the past? I could answer in terms of like, hey, the complexity of UI and wallets has improved a lot, or the scalability and costs of blockchains have the scalability has increased, the cost has gone down, or kind of like the ability to find a verifier between us is even easier in terms of like all the data out in the world. You need a full spectrum of trust, something that we offer. I could also say something like, we're aligning the incentives, better between buyers, sellers, and verifiers, certainly better than marketplaces have done it before. But, I think Hopscotch solves some of these to varying degrees. But if Hopscotch is going to succeed, it's going to be because of how we balance privacy and business in one application. Like if we say internally, like if eBay and Signal had a baby, that would be Hopscotch. And so we want to make sure that we're a really powerful business application combined with a really powerful privacy application. And we haven't seen great examples of that in the world in general. Messaging apps kind of try to come close, like maybe Telegram and iMessage or Messages now, is kind of like this middle ground area, but they just don't get the balance right. And if Hopscotch is going to succeed, it's because we got that balance right.
Okay, thanks. How do you compare Hopscotch to existing blockchain arbitration models like Kleros?
Yeah, Kleros is interesting. Hopscotch takes a more personalized, flexible approach compared to kind of their arbitration model. Kleros relies on basically anonymous, hopefully randomly selected jurors, whereas like Hopscotch is the opposite. It allows you to choose like a trusted verifier, literally someone you both know, kind of like giving you a lot more control over the process. So, our goal is to put real power back into the hands of users, like ensuring that you get a fast and much more personalized dispute resolution that actually makes sense in the real world. In terms of like, that's kind of like how we found being the major difference between us and them.
Okay. And if you had to bet on one major shift in Web3 over the next 3 years, what would it be?
What would it be? The next major 3-year shift? 3 years is a lifetime in Web3. Like, that's a loaded question. If I had to bet on one major shift, it would probably be the same shift I've believed in for the past 10 years. And so it hasn't been right. So please, this is not financial advice. The major shift I would bet on is the increasing focus on privacy. As more people wake up to how much data they're giving away, I think there'll be a huge push for privacy-first solutions, right? And that's an area which works to be at kind of the forefront of cryptography and mathematics. And I think it needs as much help as it can get, particularly on the consumer side. It's a really big problem. And I think there's room for everyone to really improve upon it.
And what's one cybersecurity myth that needs to be debunked?
A cybersecurity myth that needs to be debunked. A good one that I've always gone back to is that, my business is too small to be a target, right? Small and medium-sized businesses often kind of believe that cyber criminals only target large corporations. So they neglect kind of maybe their own internal cybersecurity. But like many attacks are just like fully automated. They're indiscriminate towards kind of who they're targeting. And so that kind of leaves these small businesses particularly really vulnerable. And my recommendation here is to just always have a backup plan, right? If someone steals your phone, make sure you've got it backed up, right? Simple things. Someone's got your credit card, know who to call and what services to cancel. Just being prepared and having a plan here can make all the difference when that happens.
Yeah, thanks. It sounds obvious, but it's not that simple as it sounds.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And what's been your biggest challenge as a founder so far?
Biggest challenge? There have been a ton of them. I'd say the one that's always kind of been around has been distribution and more distribution, right? You can't have enough distribution. And the biggest challenge here has been finding the right way to meet customers where they are, both in terms of like their needs and their preferred platforms. Like, it's not just about building a great product, but ensuring that it's accessible, it's user-friendly, and available kind of like on the channels where potential customers are already engaging, right? You really just have to meet the customer where they are. And in crypto, that can be harder said than done.
Thanks. Yeah. And what's next for you and Hopscotch after the raise and the token launch?
What's next for us? So after this raise, we've got to make a big push at blending kind of like social commerce with our verified deals, kind of like much like TikTok shops. Like, TikTok shops have been incredibly successful. So by tapping into platforms kind of like Farcaster and engaging really specific token communities, our goal is to make it easier for people to kind of complete these deals in the spaces that they already interact with. Like, we want to bring that trust, bring that commerce together, so that people can buy and sell confidently where they already spend their time. Right. And that's kind of like, that's what magic probably looks like for us moving forwards.
Okay. And if you weren't building Hopscotch, what another Web3 problem would you solve?
What other Web3 problem would I solve? I'm not sure I'd be in Web3, right? It's an absolutely grueling space. Where you have these moments of extreme happiness and just like these long drawn out periods of like sadness and depression. And that's just kind of like the straight truth. It requires this just like relentless commitment to the grind, a fucking grind set mindset, right? And so I think I'd be doing something with my hands, I don't know, like geothermal technology or like vertical farming or something that just like, you can feel it. It's a little bit more real. Sometimes kind of like Web3 gets lost in the sauce a little bit in terms of like, hey, how am I actually helping people? And so the closer we can get to that, the better I would feel.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. My last question, what's the worst security vulnerability you've ever seen?
The worst security vulnerability I've encountered is probably this is going to sound funny, but it's the human tendency to click on malicious links, right? It's not like some massive 0-day and some, big system. It's just clicking on malicious links, right? And I include myself in that category. Like, I've seen just in the past couple of days, I've seen literally some like grade A, level 10, 5-star spam, right? I mean, the creativeness of hackers that we talked about earlier, it applies in all dimensions, right? And spam is no different, right? And so, I try and survive every day in terms of like click on as few links as I possibly can. I'm super skeptical on like emails that come in or text messages come in. And, that's definitely been a driving force of like, hey, we need better end-to-end encrypted, communication lines that, rely more on privacy and less on kind of like spam protections.
Yeah. I always think about myself that I'm super skeptical, but sometimes even, I don't know, if I'm sleepy, I click.
Absolutely, right?
That's horrible.
It's hard not to sometimes.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Morgan, for coming. It was very interesting and I had fun.
Thank you, Malika. Yeah, thank you for all these kind of like amazing questions.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Have a good one. Peace.